johnr Huples Cat. Welcome to a lecture on fire set in ice.
I'd like to turn to 4 of the best things you can do to prepare for a residential fire. 3 of the 4 are easy and inexpensive.
So you should do 3 of these very soon.
But I'll start with the one that is neither easy nor inexpensive, but which is tremendously effective. If I could make one recommendation for all new home construction, it would be to install a sprinkler system.
I believe that Lewis, Mosaic Master 1, is about the only prepper I know of who's actually shown an indoor sprinkler system that they've designed and built indoors, and I think he's still building his. What a pretty day.
Sprinklers are designed to activate when a sprinkler head reaches a certain temperature and then very quickly douse a room with water. If you've not seen a demonstration of the speed with which this can put out a fire, it's well worth watching, especially if you can see a side-by-side comparison of fire suppression with and without a sprinkler system. This can provide some peace of mind, knowing that a home is protected even when residents are away.
So for our new build, we looked at a sprinkler system and rejected it. We figured the damage from the water would be about the same as the damage from smoke, pretty much a total loss. However, sprinklers can and do save lives. If I had small children in that house with me and or dependent adult relatives who are not mobile, a sprinkler system would have probably been a good idea.
I'll hasten to dispel 2 myths about sprinklers. They don't just go off on their own, unless the temperature reaches a specified level, which is hotter than a house will get absent a fire. And if one sprinkler head goes off, they don't all go off. The only sprinklers that open are those where the heads reach the designated temperature. Again, it's an excellent protective measure. Now for the 3 recommendations that are easy and affordable. First, install smoke detectors if your home doesn't already have them. Smoke detectors save lives. And if you have smoke detectors, make sure that the batteries are changed on a regular basis.
This is really basic stuff. You really ought to have one on every level of the home, and you should be checking the functionality frequently.
Note that I've used the plural smoke detectors. Unless you're in a single-room studio apartment, 1 isn't enough.
1 is none. If you can, put 2 of these on every level of the home.
Smoke detectors should be present on every level, and the National Fire Protection Association particularly recommends that they be located inside each bedroom in the home, in the halls and other areas outside bedrooms, and near stairwells on levels that do not have bedrooms.
If you can, install smoke alarms that light up the area if they're activated.
In addition to smoke detectors, while not related to fire, carbon monoxide detectors should also be placed on each level of the home, including bedrooms. Carbon monoxide gas is odorless and colorless, but deadly. It's a byproduct of incomplete combustion that can occur with furnaces, stoves, engines, fireplaces, grills, generators, and other sources, so it is important to have a warning mechanism for it.
Well, that's pretty expensive advice. I guess overkill's a good idea, but I personally don't want to wake up in my bedroom because my bedroom has enough carbon monoxide in it to trigger an alarm. What we used to do in our old home was have one where the fireplace was and one where the furnace was. The theory being that carbon monoxide would be generated from there. They would alarm if it got high, leaving us in a house not full of carbon monoxide to escape. So you pay your money, takes your choice. I'm not altogether sure you need to put them in every room of the house.
Buy a fire extinguisher. Now, I'd recommend one for each level of the house, and make sure everyone knows where they are and how to use them.
I'm really blessed having this sort of nature literally a few feet from my home, but if it ever catches fire, again for a prepper this is basic stuff. You'd have more than the basic recommendations and you would have actually consciously trained yourself and your family to enact fire safety plans, in theory. It's something that we tend to overlook. The basics like seatbelt cutters and enough fire extinguishers in our homes are the things a lot of preppers online, from what I can see, are overlooking. And it's the basic things that are the big killers.
For home use, a chemical ABC is ideal. A for solid combustible items, B for liquids, including oil and grease, and C for electrical sources. There's also a D rating for certain types of combustible metals, and K for larger cooking appliances such as a deep fryer, but these are usually less applicable in a residential setting.
I have 3 fire extinguishers. One's pretty old and small, so I'm probably going to get a 4th. The fact that it's still probably got fire retardant in it means I'm not going to chuck it out. I'm going to keep it until I know for a fact it's empty. But the other two are reasonably big and reasonably new. I'd like to get a third big one.
Develop a home fire safety plan. Anecdotally, my experience is that most persons have an appreciation for fire prevention strategies and for having smoke detectors and fire extinguishers, but neglect to actually consider a plan. Here's why I think this is important. Fires can happen suddenly and unexpectedly, and as we've discussed, they may escalate quickly. When a fire occurs is not the time to wonder what to do.
This is the same for any likely disaster, which is why we actually prep. And again, when you've had sufficient icefall or snowfall, watch out for branches and trees falling.
For each room in the house, identify 2 ways out. Most homes today are designed to have 2 points of egress or escape from a room, including windows.
Well, all of our bedrooms and the major closet and all of the bathrooms only have 1 way in, and it's the same way out. Our house design, from a fire safety point of view, is a fail. It is, of course, a very new build, and I'm not surprised the builder wouldn't think about fire escapes. He hasn't thought about a lot of things. However, you can. I have 1 way in and 1 way out of my bedroom. I have a fire escape ladder in there. Kitty has 1 way in and 1 way out of her bedroom, but she's on the ground floor. She can, and they do, open the window quickly and she can hop out. Whereas I don't really want to hop out from the top story without an escape ladder.
Of course, this may be more difficult in a high-rise apartment where a window escape may not be feasible.
If you live in a high-rise structure, and a lot of people in cities do now, what you need to do is watch a 1974 movie called The Towering Inferno. Yes, it's a bit cheesy. Yes, the acting's not great, but it's one of those great movies from the 70s that was on disasters. And The Towering Inferno, I assure you, if you watch that and you live in a high-rise, you'll probably move. It's got a lot of great ideas in it. Basically, a lot of it is showing what went wrong.
Identify in advance a meeting place outside the home where you and any other persons residing there can meet.
When you're evacuating from a house, there should be a plan. Everybody in the house should know where to go and then where to gather after they've evacuated. The difference between night and day and winter and summer about where you gather is going to be very, very telling.
Once you're out, make sure that someone calls the fire department. Dial 911 and be prepared to report where you are and what is going on. Any details you can provide about the fire will help the 911 dispatcher get information to the fire department. Don't assume that someone else will call 911. And don't go back inside. You don't know if the fire has escalated and you may be putting yourself at significant risk.
In the winter, obvious areas to actually gather fail like this because depth of snow and maybe even ice prevent you getting there.
Practice. Just like we've discussed in prior sessions, having a plan is fine. But practicing the plan helps make sure that you know it and are ready to use it. In thinking about the plan and practicing it, be sure to keep in mind that fires may happen during the daytime or nighttime, in summer or winter, and with heavy smoke that may block your views and require you to stay low to the ground to get to the closest exit.
So I'm still working on my plan, and my plan probably will envision me going into the car park area in front of the old house. Don't want to gather on the road, it's a country road. You can get knocked over easily, and I don't really want to gather on the driveway into the place. There's going to be a lot of fire trucks coming in. In fact, it would be a good idea to actually have somebody take the vehicles that are there, move them up the road and put them on the rest of our property where we have a parking area at the top to get them out of the way from the fire service will come this way. But again, getting people to do the smart and sensible thing and grid down is almost impossible, especially if you're dealing with people who've got normalcy bias to the point of idiocracy.
Almost 37% of residential fire deaths are due to smoke inhalation alone. Another 48% to a combination of burns and smoke inhalation.
See the first half of this lecture on fire. Life and limb has to always be valued higher than property. And yet, people wait, people try to get money out, people try to rescue pets, people try to do all sorts of things. Fire kills. They're not as often as smoke. The speed, the heat, the noise, the smell, all of this stuff's going to overwhelm you. A fire will not book an appointment and wait for you to be ready. So I don't have any smoke hoods. It's something I've been looking at on and off to get. I think now we're rural, I might get a couple. It might be a good idea for doing a car evac. What I can say is if I lived in a high-rise building, I would, at this point, definitively have smoke hoods.
And approximately 6% only for burns. This is why it's important to evacuate, because it's not just the flames, it's also the smoke that is deadly.
Having a well thought out and practice evacuation plan before a fire starts at 3 AM that everybody in the house is understanding and aware of really helps. And you can see here just how much snow has fallen over the winter so far and is actually staying on the ground.
When evacuating, a hot door or doorknob means there may be a fire on the other side, and it's best to use an alternate exit.
Again, I'm going to reference the Towering Inferno. It actually does show a lot of the things you shouldn't do in a fire, and this lecture actually could really help itself by showing those bits. As human beings, narratives really help, and the narrative of Towering Inferno is actually arrogance of man. Man, being male, builds this huge thing. The fire service chief says we can't fight fires above the floor. He says, don't worry, you'll never catch fire above the floor because of X, Y, and Z. Opening night, catches fire, mayhem ensues, romance is rekindled, people are burned to death. It's quite dramatic, and I do recommend it.
Which is why having 2 exit points is important. When a fire notification sounds, and this is whether a smoke detector at home or a fire alarm at a place of business, a hotel, or another location, it's time to evacuate with your family and pets. There won't be time to pack a bag, and don't even think about gathering your valuables.
I'm always shocked when a fire alarm goes off just how fast people are to assume it's a false alarm and how slow they are to actually act on the evacuation notice. You don't need them.
We don't have a sunglasses. I've got mine. You got your sunglasses? Yeah.
This was a nice hotel till it burned down.
What's going on here? It's getting...
Yeah, I got the family out ASAP. One day a fire alarm will go off and it will be real. The default response to fire alarms for you and your family must be, it is probably real. Move, rather than it's probably a false alarm, let's not rush.
If you're exposed to a fire and your clothing catches on fire, use the stop, drop, roll, cool, call.
So this is again from the Towering Inferno, and you can see how not to do it. Stop, drop, roll is absolutely vital. One of the things that's not going to get mentioned here is when you cool the person down. If it's you, remove all clothing that you can safely remove. If you are responding, get the clothing off the person as fast as you can. You may have to use scissors, you may have to cut skin. Clothing will retain heat and continue burning. This is why I have Burns first aid kits. I'm very rural now, and in a major disaster, major SHTF, even if you're not very rural, help will be a long time coming. You know, maybe consider spending $40 to $60 and getting a Burns kit with PEG from an industrial provider, not something from Costco. That, by the way, is a beaver dam, which is why I'm not going over there.
While it may be a first instinct to move or to run, stop. Drop to the floor, roll to put the fire out, cool any burned area, and call for help as soon as possible. When there's a wildfire, like the Chimney Tops fire or those that have occurred in the western United States, the outside environment itself is the source of the danger, and the goal should be to evacuate the entire area, even if that means leaving your home behind if a wildfire is approaching.
Have fuel, have detailed paper maps, have driven these routes before, know where the prevailing winds are, know where the fires are, and when you evacuate as soon as it gets uncomfortable, and that should be long before somebody knocks at your door and tells you to evacuate.
In 2017, 71,500 wildfire incidents burned across 10 million acres. As a result of these fires, over 12,000 structures burned, and 10 firefighters lost their lives battling the blazes.
There's some quite impressive little drifts developing out here. Again, adequate gasoline, clear destinations, plural, to go to, and evacuate before you're told to.
Wildfires are a significant problem addressing large areas. Several programs have been established to help prepare for them. These include programs like FireWise USA, sponsored by the National Fire Protection Association. Ready, Set, Go, developed by the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. And Fire Adapted Communities Learning Network, a program of the National Wildfire Coordinating Group. And each has a common sentiment: to help build readiness. There are several elements that span these programs and which are essential to wildfire preparedness. If told to evacuate, go. Monitor local conditions to be aware of the fire risk or any fires active in the area. Have your go kit prepared. Gather family and pets and move out quickly if necessary. Meet regularly as a community with fire officials. They can help you best understand preparedness measures and how home or landscape design can help prevent fire.
How aware you want to be in your own local community is up to you, but it's something to consider before you go barging in and talking to the fire chief about how to harden your property for wildfire. If you can do it at a community gathering, by all means do so. But one-on-one, I'd be a bit reticent, and plus all of this stuff is clearly and easily available online, even to me. This is kind of rare at this time of year. It's not open water, but there's no snow on it. The wind patterns have actually prevented the snow accumulating on it. As you can see, there's plenty of snow here. So you have to really balance the risks. Be prepared to fight the fire, and I'll be talking quite a bit about how to do that. I don't recommend that. I do follow the guidelines. Get out. In the modern age, you've got insurance and all the rest of it, and I'll talk a bit about insurance. And get out. But in grid down, you may have to stay and fight. So it's best to know how to, right?
Third, be aware of issues pertaining to air quality. This is particularly true if you or anyone in your household has respiratory challenges.
One of the things about smoke, it will persist for weeks in a wildfire scenario that's big enough with the winds in the right direction, but it can also persist for months to possibly years if we have a nuclear exchange. Dealing with bad air outside the home is something we should be definitely considering and thinking about and hopefully acting on before it happens. Yeah, it's actually got open water there. I don't see any tracks around it, which is unfortunate. But yeah, it's kind of cool. I'm not quite sure why there is open water there.
Know your geography, including egress routes. Neighborhoods should have at least 2 roadways that provide points of exit. Again, remember from the chimney tops fire that certain roads were blocked due to debris or downed power lines.
I'm on a no exit road, so if the fire's south to me, I'm not driving out, and driving in might be impossible to help me. I can walk out and bicycle out to the north, and I can of course cross lakes with a kayak, and we have inflatable ones now, but I'd really hate to have to do that, especially at 3 in the morning.
And remember that GPS probably doesn't know where the fire is.
That's a really smart point. You've also got to remember that cell phones and ordinary radios may fail if the fire takes out the towers. Using smart technology routinely might mean that in a disaster, you put yourself at significant risk of getting lost or even damaged or killed. Try to use normal maps, try to use your normal visual acuity and your normal brain sense when you're out and about in your local area. Smart GPS, not always not smart sometimes.
Consider how design can contribute to fire protection. While some fires cannot be prevented and are so large that they'll destroy wildland-urban interface areas, there are steps that property owners can take to enhance protections. These include following construction codes that specify the use of fire-resistant materials.
Which is all well and good, but Glenfell and a few other buildings around the world have quite clearly shown that if you live in or work in high-rise buildings and you rely on the building codes to protect you and 911 or 999 response to protect you, you might die. So seriously consider where you are, what's going on, what the likely effects are of any catastrophe in the area. Take sensible and sane steps to mitigate it. Don't just think it's somebody else's problem. If you're in the 14th floor and you can't get down the stairwells, that's your problem.
Keeping a clear zone free of flammable materials, trees, leaves, mulch, and shrubbery around the house, grass accepted. Monitoring to ensure that there's a minimal amount of ignitable material, including deck, furniture, or other combustible items. And minimizing points where embers could enter the home or vehicles.
Doing all this stuff can be very, very daunting. I have a multi-year plan to slowly and surely remove the decades-old growth and accumulation of wood piles all over the property, to cut back the trees and the lower branches that are right next to all the buildings. It was cleared probably 30, 40 years ago, bit of a clearance about 20 years ago. Since then, it's just been left to go wild again, which is fine until you have a wildfire. Then you lose everything, for very little reason. What I've been doing is I've been using a saw and mussels and removing whole debris fields and stacking them there. And what remains of the birch is actually kind of hard and slow to cut with a saw, so I'm thinking of getting maybe a 2-person saw and getting Kitty to help me. Don't really want to use gas unless I have to, but the idea is eventually this will, and I think it might take a couple of years, have an open area where you walk in and we have some seeding and some trees left that aren't just a mess. And then actually have a trail on the south part of the property heading in that direction.
While there are some measures that may be taken to prevent residential fires, there is little that a resident can do to actually stop a wildfire from occurring.
I really enjoy these great courses, and this one I particularly like, and I think he's quite smart. But I fundamentally and absolutely disagree with you here. There is absolutely things you can do and should do routinely if you live around an area that's prone or possibly prone to wildfires. Number one, don't litter. Number two, collect other people's litter, specifically glass bottles, metal, and anything that could reflect and concentrate the light of the sun in July and August if you live in the Northern Hemisphere. Collect garbage and put it in trash bags and take it to dumps. That's things you can do.
As a result, most of the actions related to wildfire are focused on preparedness if one does occur, and mitigation to reduce potential damages. Conversely, residential fire safety can focus on mitigation, preparedness, and also prevention. Fire is a real threat. As we have seen, its annual impacts are substantial in terms of property loss, financial impact, and life safety. This session can only be a beginning for investigating fire safety.
But whatever you do, please begin.
Until next time, stay safe.
Well, that's it for me, Huples Kittens, the Great White North. I hope you enjoyed this. I thought it was a bit of a good counterpunch to a lecture on fire to actually show the opposite effect. And I think that's one of the things we don't take into account very much. This courses are really good, and I'm looking forward to doing the rest of them. I'm interested to see how much they talk about power outages and cold. Because to be honest with you, that to me is probably going to be the biggest threat for human loss of life in the near future, is a widespread power outage with snow and ice conditions over a wide area that's not used to it. Happy thoughts. Toodles.
This has been a Dog in a Bonnet Productions.